Elaine Clegg, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am very excited for this conversation. We've been chatting for a bit here already, so
Yeah.
we're very warmed up. You are the CEO of Valley Regional Transit, correct?
I am.
Okay. You are then at the heart of the public transportation and public transit conversation in the Treasure Valley. We are obviously growing. Many, like there are very few large metropolitan areas that I know of in the United States that don't have some kind of really robust public transit, be it light rail or bus system. People complain about a lot of things in this area, specifically traffic. They're not happy about traffic.
Right.
I understand. They're not happy about density increasing. Okay, I understand that. They're not happy about the housing cost. Okay, I understand that. And they're also not happy about losing ag land. Okay, I understand that. All of these things come together and it's like, well, there is an argument for, say, like a light rail system where, look, you have people paying a lot of money to rent or buy something in, let's say, downtown Boise, because that's where they're close to their jobs.
Yeah.
Or you have people that are like, 15 minutes outside. And that puts a lot of pressure because there are jobs in that area. Micron expansion is going to increase that significantly.
Yeah.
The argument goes, hey, look, if we had a light rail system to somewhere, pick wherever it is, let's say within a half an hour distance, you could tell, let's say Boise Hunter Homes, you say, hey, or CBH Homes, you tell a developer, hey, I'm going to develop a light rail to this spot right here. Okay. And it's going to be a 25-minute straight shot. You could just jump on this train or jump on whatever system of transportation. If you would like, just heads up, build 10,000 houses here, make them whatever density you want. And that way we can essentially take the pressure off of the localized area downtown Boise. We won't increase the traffic coming in the main arteries. Like obviously State Street is going through a lot of stuff right now.
Right.
We can take pressure off in the housing market. We can take pressure off the streets. We can supply people with a lower density housing option. We can do all of these things, but the requirement would be public transit.
Yeah.
Right. But nobody likes that option either. So it's like, we don't like the problems we have, but we also don't like some of the proposed solutions. Talk to me about the history of public transit and what kind of wrangle we're in.
So first of all, I'd say I don't think it's true that nobody likes that option. I think what people don't understand is that transportation in general is subsidized. We have this myth, this perception that driving is user fee paid, and that emanates from the fact that there was a gas tax instituted many, many years ago, and we used that gas tax for state highways and for ultimately for the interstate. In the beginning, it wasn't very much. Once they built the interstate, they increased it. The dirty little secret is that 80% of our roadways are not state or federal. They're local. And guess what the biggest source of funding for local roads is? It's property tax. So we have this myth that, we drive, that's great, we pay for it, no problem. But we shouldn't have other forms of transportation that we have to pay for because we don't want to subsidize something. If we have other forms of transportation, they ought to pay for themselves. Well, transportation doesn't pay for itself anywhere. I mean, look at airports. There's another example. We say, well, yeah, the airlines make money. Well, okay, they do. That discounts the fact that their stations, the airports, are paid for with federal money, largely, with local support often. And their dispatch system is completely federally subsidized. So sure, you can make money if your business model says, all I need to do is have access to your airport for a fee and be able to have you dispatch all my planes, I can make money. And yet
but you can't make money if you can't get the public tax dollars to pay for the actual, as you call it, station, which we call airports.
Oh,
I had no idea. So like the Boise International Airport is subsidized federally and locally.
Yeah.
Oh, so okay. So hang on.
So
you can make money off of the system that somebody else is
every 10 or 15 years when they start losing money and they get a direct subsidy.
Right. Well, I think it's isn't it true that every single, with the absence of like Southwest and JetBlue, every other major airline has gone bankrupt in the history of airlines?
Yeah.
Like nobody has made it unscathed.
And then got bailed out.
Right. Or just been bankrupt.
Bankrupt and went away.
And right. Or just issued new stock and, went through.
But in many cases, I also got bailed out. So my point is every form of transportation is subsidized in some way. And so the choice is not, do we want to subsidize transportation? It's what kind of transportation system do we want? And if we want one where everyone only has the choice to drive, then we will have to put up with certain things. And traffic congestion is probably the main one of those, because the places around this country particularly, because frankly, most other countries don't do this to themselves, where they only have one form of transportation. But the places in this country that only have driving as a real choice have a lot of congestion.
The congestion, to me, I don't think rouses that much sympathy. For instance, you're like, hey, it's congested downtown. I don't care. I don't go downtown. Right. So like it's bad for people that have to experience it, and it's bad for people in a very specific time. But I think the congestion argument to me was only one piece that I was like, yeah, that's not good. But there are other huge, for instance, I dated this girl in college who was from Chicago, and we went to, her Thanksgiving in Chicago, right? Now, she didn't live in Chicago. She lived in Naperville. Naperville was like 45 minutes outside of Chicago or something. And her dad commuted from Naperville to downtown Chicago. He was like a high risk, analysis for coal company or something. And he took the train every single day. All right. And it was straight shot, jumped on it. No problem. We took the train in one day because I was like, yeah, I want to go see downtown. Like,
go
cool,
see
whatever.
Downtown Chicago.
Right. So we got to go see it. My point is that when we did that, it was like, wait a minute. If this train didn't exist, the traffic going into this city would be atrocious. The parking would be atrocious. But beyond the congestion of parking and transportation, the cost of housing there would be astronomical, because all of the people that commuted in from the surrounding areas would likely probably they'd either contribute to the congestion, or they'd say, no, I just want to live closer to my job. I'm not going to be part of this congestion. That would drive up housing prices. Yeah. You may also have a problem with employers being like, it's going to cost us too much to pay for people here because housing is so expensive and we can't afford to pay them the wage they would require. That like, then you have potentially problems with employers and the capacity for people to bring industry to that area. It's like you have all of these problems where it's like, hey, you want cheaper housing? You need to be able to transport people effectively. Right. And
absolutely,
as a crow flies, or as we build certain types of transportation, it doesn't take the same amount of time. Right. Like if you have to use only roadways that are in existence right now, then you could get from point A to point B, and that might take you an hour. But if you built a new mode of public transit or something of that nature, it's like, no, it's only 20 minutes. It's a straight shot. The problem is like when you're in the car, it's like you got to go all the way, but like housing cost is a huge piece of this, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I'll disagree with you just a bit on the timing, but not on the concept that if we were to build transit, we would have a better commute than what we have today. Many people, you say congestion is part of the problem. A lot of people don't care about it, but the people who drive into downtown Boise every day care a lot about it.
Sure.
Because every day that trip already takes an hour. Some days it takes an hour and a half. The prediction is it can take longer than that. And so if we can provide opportunity to do something different on that particular trip, it changes the way the whole valley works in many ways. So we're actually looking at that. You mentioned light rail. We're looking at heavy rail. Heavy rail runs on existing tracks. It runs side by side with freight. There's new trains. I actually went down to Salt Lake City. It's, a wonderful, incredible factory to go look at that's building aluminum unibody trains. First time in the United States we've had aluminum trains. They're faster. They're more energy efficient. They're more nimble. So they act a lot like light rail, but they can run side by side with freight. So we're envisioning that we got the freight line that already exists in this valley. It goes from, there's main line from downtown Caldwell to downtown Nampa. At Nampa, it goes by Fort Idaho Center. It goes by 10 Mile. It goes into downtown Meridian. It goes across Eagle Road, right where Sensi and Blue Cross are. It goes to the mall in Boise, goes to the Boise Depot, and it goes to Micron, or at least within a mile of Micron. it is a line that already exists that is within 2 miles of 58% of the population and 69% of the jobs. So if we can utilize that as a spine and then build, in the beginning, a bus network to serve it, and hopefully as ridership grows, you'd upgrade that to light rail, we could move a ton of people. City of Salt Lake started doing just that back in the early 2000s when they had the first Olympics. First, they built the light rail first. They were able to get some, because of the Olympics, get some federal grants. Light rail is very expensive, by the way, on a per mile basis, incredibly expensive. They built that first. At the same time they did that, they purchased the rights to the freight line, two tracks of it. And in 2008, they started service on that. They move 4 million people a year on that train today, 15,000 people a day. And overall, within their system, they have an incredible both light rail and bus system supporting all of that. They move about 25 million people a year. And that's 25 million cars that aren't on the road that, are doing something else. Another example.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Here? So this is all predicated on utility and a value proposition to the end user.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if somebody is commuting into, say, downtown Boise, and then they have to decide, okay, it makes more sense for me to jump on this train. Like, here's one for you. Sure. I was commuting down to Boise during the legislative session because I had a studio down there. I was doing all the interviews. It cost me, the commute time actually wasn't that bad because I was going down at like 7:30 in the morning, right? Yeah. Or it was like pretty early. The sun was atrocious. Sun on State Street.
Imagine. Yeah.
Oh, it was like
State Street at that time of day is not good.
It was the most stressful thing I had ever done. Like literally the sun's right in your eyes. And it's like, you can't see the stoplights. You can barely see the car in front of you. It was a little crazy, right? Anyway, the point is that I would commute down there. Commuting time wasn't that bad, 35 minutes max. And once I got there, though, I had to park. And the parking clocked in at $20 a day every single day.
Every day.
So it was $100 per week. So I was ripping through like roughly $400 per month just in parking. I was like, wait, if I had to do this every day for a job, I'd need an extra like $5,000 a year just to compensate for just the parking. That's not car maintenance. That's not gas. That's not anything. And let alone the accident I would inevitably get in because of the sun blinding me as I drove down the street at some point. But that's a huge cost that, and again, I don't know anything about what it costs for light rails and stuff, but I do know, like, listen, if there was an alternative, and I was doing that long term because I was just there for roughly like 3 months. If I was there long term, I'd definitely take a look at it and say, okay, but like this is $5,000 a year, right? Like what else could be done or what other things? So there has to be a value proposition for people engaging in this, and they have to look at it and say, okay, this is my better option, right?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, State Street right now is planned for bus rapid transit. It sort of mimics light rail. It depends on what kind of infrastructure you build around it. Do you have a dedicated lane for the bus or at least a minimally shared lane? Do you have good bus stops? Do you have amenities at those bus stops with shelters and all of the things, right, that make it work? Do you have some stops that have park and rides at them so people on the urban edge can drive into that park and ride, get on the bus? And we're in the midst right now of building out that infrastructure to make it work better. We just had a meeting with ACHD last month about how to finish those stretches within the city of Boise, which is east of Glenwood. ITD has identified that Highway 44 is the next thing they need to lean into west of Glenwood. And so once we get that infrastructure in place, the modeling shows, if the modeling is correct, that riding the bus will be at least as fast as the car and potentially a few minutes faster. Won't be as fast as a light rail because it won't travel 60 miles an hour. It won't be grade separated.
Sure.
But because of the things that we can do with transit priority at lights and various things, we can make it compete with the car and maybe even beat it.
Okay.
And and it costs money, but not so light rail is about 100 million a mile on average in the United States. Bus rapid transit route like this, if you do really good infrastructure, is more like 5 to 10 million a mile. Okay.
Hang on a second.
Sure.
Now, here's the thing. And again, let's be clear. Matt knows nothing about any of this. Whenever you talk to people about the current uptake and utilization of the system, people that are in favor of public transit always say, yes, but people aren't using it because we don't have enough. And I think I was chatting with Monica Church. I'm like, okay, but that you have a kid. It's like having a kid with a piece of chicken on their plate that they're not eating. And you're like, I want my kid to eat more chicken. I know, let's pile more chicken on the plate. And it's like the kid didn't take the bite from the first one. Why is putting more on? I realized though, in the wake of that conversation, that it's like, wait a minute, that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. Because what I realized is like, okay, look, let's say the person's living in Boise and they want to move out and they're very gainfully employed, but they're driving up housing costs and they're like all these things and they'd like to move out of Boise, but they're closer to their job. And they're like, all right, I could move to place X. Place X has a bus. It has one bus a day. Yeah. They will not look at that place as a viable alternative with public transportation. Right. They're like, well, I'm going to have to start driving the whole $20 a day, all these things, right? Now, the flip side of that is, what if it has one bus every minute? It is like the most reliable on time, like, boom, you're like, okay, great. So like, that's obviously that works. That's way too much transportation, but there's some balance in between here where it's like, it's in between one bus a day and one bus every minute that leads people to realize, okay, this is a viable alternative for me. I can move out of the city. I can move into an area where I have more space, where I have more room, and I have a viable public transit option to take me back in so I don't have to fight with the traffic because let's say I just hate the traffic and the sun in my eyes, whatever it is. Yeah. But that's the point, which is, no. If you do, like, the reason you bring more transit is to increase opportunities and different options, which theoretically would increase uptake and reliability of the system. Because if you really don't have enough, nobody's going to plan on it or wrap their day around it.
It's true. Well, so great example here, and then a comparative example. So when I came on board at Valley Regional Transit, I had been a board member for 20 years. I'd not been a transit professional. I've worked in transportation and land use my whole life. I had a nonprofit and, of course, served on the Boise City Council. So a lot of knowledge about it, had never been on the inside of a transit agency. While I was on the board, I was president of the board. The year I was president, I worked really hard to make sure that we, for the first time ever, got a long-range plan. What would it look like if we had money to build more transit? And we wrote that plan, and the goal was that we'd begin to institute some of it somehow as we could. Well, I came on board. We had not really leaned into frequent routes, which is absolutely the key to people riding more transit. And so I made a decision early on that we were going to do a service change that wasn't going to cost more money. It was going to consolidate some routes, which means that some people were going to get less service, but the places where there were lots of people where we could do really good service, we're going to get really good service. So prior to that, we had one route that ran 15 minutes most of the day, and that's State Street, by the way. That's another piece of what makes that potentially a really valuable route. And it was our highest ridership route. It was the highest ridership route in the state of Idaho. And we knew if we could do more of those, we'd be in really good shape. So we did the same on Vista and the same on Fairview. And Vista goes up to the airport. The ridership on Vista hasn't gained as much, but because we'd already had pretty good ridership there, pretty good frequency, and so the change was not as obvious. Fairview had two routes serving it. Sometimes of the day it had half-hour service, sometimes of the day it had 1 hour service. It was really hard to understand which bus was coming when and where it was going. We put one bus, comes every 15 minutes, same route all the time, and our ridership has gone through the roof on that route.
because people can reliably depend on it.
Because now,
They're like every quarter, it's like every 7:15, 7:30, 7:40, blah, 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 and it's going.
And I can walk out there without looking at the schedule and know it's going to come soon enough that I'll be fine.
And this is one piece that I have been slow to take up, which is dependency and reliability of the public transit leads to, and frequency. If you have high frequency of reliable, dependable service, then people look at it. It's like, oh, I don't need to do anything. Like the next train's coming, or like the next bus is coming.
I know it's going to be there, and I can count on it. So that,
and you also have, you have a lower risk problem too. If I miss it, it's not like my whole day's shot. Like, okay, if I miss it, I'm 15 minutes and I get the next one. If you miss it when it's infrequent, the risk involved here is so astronomical. Really, it's like, okay, here goes my whole day. It's going to be an hour.
Now
I better as well call it in. Like I'm not even.
Exactly. But even at an hour, so talking about not just frequency, but dependability and reliability, we have another route when we did this big service change at the same time that had been just peak hour. Would go early in the morning, come back at the end of the day when workday ended. It ran mostly 1 hour headways during that peak hour. But again, you couldn't rely out on the middle of the day and lots of things. We made it 1 hour all day, same route. Again, reliable, dependable. Even at 1 hour, we've doubled ridership on it. I can't imagine what it might be if we could get it to 30 minutes or 15 minutes.
Or to a degree where, like when I would ride the BART train back in the state that shall not be named, and I remember this from the time I was a kid all the way until, and again, I didn't ride on BART very often, but I never, ever checked the schedule ahead of time. Oh. It was not like going to a movie theater. You better check the schedule because that movie's only playing, like every hour or every hour and a half or whatever it is.
Whatever.
But the BART train, it's like you just go to the BART station and it's like the next train's coming. It's like, or you just missed it. Okay, next one's in 8 minutes. Oh, I gotta wait 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it didn't substantially change my world experience. It was like, okay,
exactly.
We go. Like it's this reliable thing you didn't think about. In fact, I remember my friend Brad when I was like 17. We went to the movies and we were hanging out. Brad and I were friends, but he also had this other group of friends that I didn't really know. Anyway, he was like, "Come on, we're gonna go to the movies." I'm like, "What movie are we going to see?" They're like, "We don't know." Like, what do you mean? So we go to the movie theater and they're like, what's playing? I'm
what's
like,
playing right now?
What do you mean? And it literally was what's playing right now, because they're like, whatever, like we're just getting out of the house. I'm like, okay, I like that. But like, we're just going to spend $7 or something. And we ended up seeing like a random movie. And the alternative was wait 45 minutes for the movie we wanted to see. And I was already like, this is weird. I don't know, guys, like what's going on? But that's actually a great analogy to public transit. What if movies were every 5 minutes there was the movie you wanted to see? You would never check the movie schedule. You'd go when it's convenient for you. But the reality is you don't know, like you better check and you better go at the time when the movie's going to play because they're so infrequent. Well, of course you're not going to go.
Exactly.
Or you're going to go less frequently, or you're going to plan ahead. And if you miss it, that's a problem.
And then you've got a big problem. So yeah, absolutely. So another example of this I guess the other thing I'd like to say is, so what's the reason we don't do more of that in this region?
I don't know, $10 billion?
Yeah.
Isn't that the reason?
It's not that much, actually.
You said 100 million per mile. How many miles
if we did light rail.
Okay.
If we did light rail. So we're doing a plan right now. What would it cost to do frequent service in more places, do a network of frequent service and connections to that network, and have this spine railroad? And right now, we spend about $12 million in funding from our local partners, another $2 million in funding we earn. So about $14 million, and then we match that with federal money, spend about $25 million a year operating the system. We think for $100 million a year, and about half of that local or fares, that we could operate the kind of system that we'd really like to. This gets into that exponential thing. So back to your analogy about the chicken. You say, well, I put the chicken on the plate, he didn't eat it. Well, what if the chicken was a block away and he didn't walk down the block and go get it? And then you said, well, I want him to eat more chicken, so I'm going to make it more available and easier to get to. So you moved it half a block away. Maybe occasionally went and got it. But now you moved it onto the table right in front of him. He ate it. So that's the analogy of why service becomes exponential. So I add 4 times more service, I'm going to get 10 times more riders, not 4 times more riders. Because all of a sudden it's so much easier, so much more convenient, so much more reliable to so many more people than it is at that lower rate. So the city of Spokane, same size region as city of Boise. It's also a linear valley, has pretty much the same demographics, maybe a little different, but not that much. And they have about 4 times more service than we do. They move 10 million people a year. We move about 1 million. So we're pretty confident if we spend this 4 times more, provide this really good connected system, that we won't just get 4 times more riders, we'll get 10 times more riders. That'll take 9 million cars off the road. But more importantly, to your point, it will provide access for 9 million more people to have a choice in housing, have a choice how they move around, to save some money. This region is one of the most expensive in the United States for driving because we drive so much, we drive so far. It's almost $15,000 a year per person to own and operate a car. You add housing onto that and look at disposable income. You're considered housing burdened if you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing. You're considered transportation burdened if you're spending more than 15%. You're considered housing and transportation burdened if total is more than 45%. This region, the average is 52%. 60% of the people in this region are housing burdened. A majority of the people in this valley can't afford a place to live reasonably easily. And most of those also can't afford to travel reasonably and easily. And so if we could do this, if we spend some money, if all of you agree to tax yourselves enough to spend enough money to provide this better system, everybody can have a better quality of life.
And when this is the piece that I think comes down to, say I never plan on commuting into Boise.
Yeah.
Why do I care? I'm like, no. I'm not. You're not getting a dime any more than you get. And ultimately, there are benefits for like housing costs.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So if I want my kids to be able to afford houses, right? I have 3 boys and I would love for them to stay in this area. Something must be done about the housing. If we don't want gigantic apartments and we don't want this, we don't want that, it's like, well, then we have to do something to connect areas that can be built on, that people are happy to build on and happy to live there. We have to connect those people to employment, right? Every time in the, my former life, when the BART station, I was old enough to see where BART stations got expanded and then where BART corridors were made when developers were here. And they would advertise them as like light rail coming, right? Or like BART connection coming. And there'd be these gigantic grass areas down the middle of, and again, I'm not saying that. Yeah, right. Yeah. But when you would do that, people would buy and develop there because they knew there was going to be transit, or they just like extend it one stop.
Yeah.
And then that next stop, there was all this housing, and that took the pressure off the people in housing elsewhere. And it also enabled home ownership to a lot of people. And it's like, listen, you're just adding on like a 5-minute more longer train ride, like whatever. And I'm not saying I've always loved every single trip I took on BART. That's not the case. But what I can say is that did take pressure off housing and enable people to be connected to high-paying jobs and attainable housing. Attainable housing, not affordable housing. Yeah. Attainable housing.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good word.
And that to me, it's like, okay, so even if I never plan on commuting, there will be more attainable housing options because the pressure will be taken off of the centralized areas because we'll have better transportation around. That's a value proposition to somebody who is never planning on commuting into Boise.
And the other value proposition for them is that transit has about a 3-to-1 ROI. For every dollar I invest, there's a $3 impact on the local economy. And that's proven across the country. We did a study here. We're pretty confident that that is holding true here. And so if I can invest more money, your community is going to be more prosperous. And if it's more prosperous, it's more likely to be able to support better services, to have more things that you might want to go visit. All of the stuff that comes with prosperity is helped when you introduce transit. driving also has an ROI, certainly connections, but there's an upper limit to it. And we're getting, I think, close to that because the congestion, because it becomes less easy to drive. People drive less. There's Chris talked about the elusive nature of predicting what will happen when you widen a road. And
Chris Stanley.
Gotcha.
Who was
on your
great.
podcast
Fantastic.
recently.
Yes.
And a friend of mine, we've worked a bunch together on various transportation projects. Anyway, the elusive nature of that also makes the economic impact of roadways also somewhat elusive. We always predict it's going to have this huge impact on the economy, but because it never quite reaches what we predict for it in terms of ridership, in terms of driving, it hardly ever has the impact that was projected. Transit, on the other hand, is pretty well proven around the country. You make that investment, the investment follows because it is that exponential growth. I suppose there's an upper limit, although I don't know what it is. I was able to visit Taipei about 5 years ago. They have 24 million people. They have an amazing subway system. It's the first one I've seen in my life that's a gridded underground subway over an 8 square mile area. So every 2 miles, there's a train, both directions. It connects the whole city. We got everywhere just so easily. And those trains were crowded, but not always standing room only or any of that. They just had lots of people all the time. They move more people in that country by train than anywhere in the United States because how well connected that is, maybe with the exception of New York. Tokyo has the busiest train network in the world, and I don't know what the upper limit of transit is. If there reaches a place where people say, "Oh, I'm not going to ride because it's too crowded."
Well, again, looking at this is my problem with a lot of broader thinking. I'm an idiot. Okay, so for me, you're like, we're sitting in Boise, and you're like, and Tokyo and Taipei. I'm like, I don't even know where Taipei is. Like, I'm not that bright. You're giving me too much credit, and I can't be roused to action or sympathy or agreement when we compare Tokyo to here. And I'm not saying you're proposing it.
I'm not trying to,
but what I keep coming back to is, okay, what do I care about now, right now, today?
Sure.
I care about housing costs. I care about congestion. I care that this area is growing. I know a lot of people care about, densities and all these things. It's like, okay, but we never get to a better future if we don't meaningfully address those things. If you don't want density and things are crowded, you have to move people out, right? Because people are going to keep moving here unless we
tank the economy somehow, and who wants that?
Right. And if we tank this economy, every other economy is tanked anyway. Like odds of Idaho faring well, especially considering it's an agricultural state, are pretty strong.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not like you're not going to have a .com bust, right? Like you had it elsewhere. Anyway, the point is we have to address those things. So it's like, okay, there are all of these problems. And if we want our kids to be able to afford housing, if we want people, when Micron brings in 10,000 jobs, where are those people going to live? Right?
Good question.
Right. And if you don't want a crazy dense center, public transportation would be a thing that helps alleviate and connect other places. Like that's just the way it goes. And people can deny all of those things, but we're going to sit in the problem. Like, could you imagine New York without a subway system? No. Or
even Washington, D.C. It wouldn't work.
Right. Right. Or the Bay Area.
The city wouldn't work. The Bay Area.
Right. If you didn't have a transit system, it's like how would you get people? Now, I would love your commentary on this. I have heard that there is talk of a beltway around Kuna, and that's kind of the alternative because, again, we need to deal with transit somehow, be it public transit, greater access for cars, cheaper parking, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter to me. I just want like a good solution. What is the argument against having like a large beltway around the Kuna area? And I don't even know exactly what that includes, but
here's my reaction to that. What we need is to get local trips off the freeway. Right now, the freeway's crowded not because of through trips. There frankly aren't that many. The freeway's crowded because everyone who wants to make a local trip looks at their phone and puts in the map and it says, oh, going on the freeway is the fastest way to get there. Now,
Sure.
it might only be by a minute or 2 minutes, but it's driving you to that. And
I want the 2 minutes. I
and
want the 2
everyone
minutes.
chooses it. Well, okay, maybe you do. If 2 minutes is that important to you, I guess, I'd rather have my life, put it that way. But everyone's chooses the freeway.
Sure.
So what we really need are alternative routes for local trips that will take some of the pressure off the freeway. And what we really need is my train to take pressure off the freeway. Now, does that mean we don't need more east-west corridors? Of course not. We do need more east-west corridors. It costs $2 billion to widen the freeway. It's going to cost another $2 billion to add another lane. Building
for how long? What distance?
for 30 miles, about 30 miles.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. So a new
So you're dealing with about 100,000
anyway,
or 100 million.
What? And is it worth whatever we'd get? And wouldn't that just drive development out to it? Because to your point, the developer says, oh, now there's a new beltway out here. I can build all kinds of houses.
Right.
Let's do it. But it doesn't address that transportation housing plus cost, because if you move out there and you got to drive everywhere, your transportation bills can be pretty high. So what you want is to figure out those places where we can build housing and give people a choice in transportation so that the combined cost, so if it's 30% for housing and 15% for transportation, but I live in a place where I'm only going to spend 5 or 10% on transportation, then I can spend 35% on housing and still be fine. We don't have any of those choices in this region. So my reaction to that is, yes, we need more east-west corridors. I don't think we need another Beltway, Expressway kind of corridor. I think we need alternatives for local trips. We need to plan about how we're going to serve this valley over the long term, both for freight and movement. We haven't done a very good job of that. I think I can move more freight on the rail corridor as well. We can consolidate some of that off of the freeway. And we need to plan for the very long term. But Idaho has such unrestricted land use laws, which some people think is a great thing, except that 30% of 40% of the economy in Canyon County is agriculture. And if that land goes away, so does their economy. Then what? What economy are we going to replace that with? And
well, we're going to end up paying way more in taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Because, the house for every dollar that residential housing puts in, they draw on like $1.40 of county services.
Right.
For every dollar that I think it's ag land puts in, they only draw on like 50 cents.
Exactly.
So it's like they're subsidizing the residential stuff within the county. So if all that goes away, all of our property taxes go up. And
it just spreads out development in a way that makes it harder, more expensive, and longer to get anywhere you want to go. So yes, we should look at those east-west corridors. Let's do it the right way. Look at economic development as part of it. Look at other alternatives as part of it. Identify the east-west corridors that we can do feasibly for the lowest price, not for the highest price, and drive the economy in a way that's positive. So I'm hoping as we look at that, I want to look at it. Absolutely. We need more east-west travel. No argument from me on that. But let's look at all the alternatives and not just assume that the answer is this one thing that somebody's thrown out there.
Gotcha. Man, we've talked about so many things.
We have.
Are there, outside of the huge one of offering more housing attainability, outside of the huge one of offering an alternative to just continuing to increase density, outside of offering, all of these different benefits, are there big things I'm missing? One big thing is, look, in 30 years, I was talking to a representative recently who was talking about years ago, people were talking about extending 55 straight down just across the valley, because they're like, look, right now you got to go to like Eagle Road, and it's, and it would have cost X number of dollars, 30 years ago. Now he's like, it's impossible. It would cost billions and billions of dollars to stretch. And by the way, we're in a pickle now because there are a lot of people here. This is when we really need it. And now the land is worth so much, it's impossible. Yeah. And he had described that as nearsighted. By the way, he's a very, very conservative lawmaker. And he was just looking at it like, look, these are just the facts. We waited. We didn't want to make the investment. And now that investment is almost unattainable because it's like 100 times more expensive.
Yeah.
If we don't do something sooner, like in 30 years, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at a patched together kind of reactionary transportation system, and we're going to get exactly what comes with that, which is dysfunction on roadways, higher expensive in real estate. We're going to end up having to accommodate higher property taxes, higher densities, right? Because people are going to be here. It's going to be more expensive. That's going to drive density up as well. Like we have all these things that people don't really want coming down the pipe.
So a couple of things I would say to that. That's why I say absolutely we need to plan for this east-west travel. We probably need another north-south travel as well. So we need to plan for it, but in a way that really looks at all of those impacts over time and decides which one is going to be best, which one is going to serve us best, and lean into that. So I don't disagree with him on that at all. I would say this, you keep talking about how people hate density, and I get that they do. We talked about this before we got started, that density, people assume that density is this monolithic thing, that if it's dense, it's all dense. And what we talked about was living in neighborhoods where you have single family housing, you have fourplexes, you have a 14-unit apartment, you have a 40-unit condo. It's all in the same place. It all works. Collectively, the density is high enough to support transit, to support other ways to travel, and to support some local services. One of the things I love about the place I live is I can walk to a restaurant. I can walk to the grocery store. I can walk to, the school. And it gives me all of these choices. That doesn't happen accidentally. It doesn't happen because I live in a monolithic neighborhood of 2.5-acre large lot housing. It happens because I live in a very diverse, mixed up neighborhood that has commercial, some density, some single family housing, a bunch of parks, a bunch of schools with big schoolyards. And so I hope we can have a more nuanced discussion about density. Density isn't necessarily bad. Density is what drives economy. Those dense, central core city places are the things that, frankly, support this nation's economy. So we need those. How do we create smaller, dense centers or corridors that aren't monolithic, that, it isn't density for miles and miles, it's density in the right places, consolidated in a way that it serves all of the less dense area around them by providing those services and those things that they otherwise would have to drive miles for, wouldn't have access to. Also serves as that transit center where you can get to that and then get on that frequent transit wherever you need to go.
Right, because you're trying to draw people to a bus stop when everything's a half-acre lot. That's going to be a tough sell.
It's really tough.
If you position density and transportation, I had Mayor McLean on recently, well, not recent, months back, but recently enough, and she was talking about complexes where there were bus stops directly beneath them. There was a child daycare center, there was a park across the street, like there was a grocery store, all of these things. So for people that were, working to live life effectively in the absence of absorbing the $15,000 per year cost of owning a car per person. Yeah. She was like, look, if you're, a growing family or you're a single parent, mom, dad, whatever, it's like, you're going to be really happy if you can get to work, you can drop your kid off, you can go to the park, you can get groceries all within this little area. Right.
So I hope, like I say, the conversation around housing and density becomes a little more nuanced, and it isn't all density is bad, all large lot housing is good. It's what do we need and where do we need it and how do we diversify and mix it together in a way that works better for everyone.
Do you know any developers that have made developments around transit systems in particular, like articulated, hey, we want to do this here because we know, X, Y, or Z is or is not present?
So in the Boise region, not yet, because we don't have good enough transit to do that. We're beginning to talk about doing that on the Fairview route that we recently got the more frequent housing on. What we do have in the Boise region are developers who have leaned into what I call transit-ready development. Probably the best example is Harris Ranch. Harris Ranch started as mostly single-family homes. They added a little bit of commercial. Then they added a few more dense housing. Now they're adding a center, a village center, and a lot more dense housing around that village center, as well as a school and some other things. At the end of all of that, it will be really easy to serve it with transit because it will attract a lot of riders. In the beginning, it didn't. We actually had to cut service there because the route we had was not attracting enough riders. Now we've learned that with the way we redesigned it, we have a real opportunity to add some service back in and grow ridership in a great way because the development is maturing in a way that can support it. In other places, you already mentioned, there's lots of places around the country that have more mature transit systems and more mature transit planning that, in fact, people are absolutely building because transit is there. The one I'm most familiar with that is a big one is in the Salt Lake region. It's called Daybreak. So for anyone who is familiar with that region, years ago, this was just, a bunch of land between the city, the freeway, and the lake, south of town, South Jordan, down in there.
Sure.
Nothing there. Literally nothing. So a few farms, a few ranches. And now it's one of the fastest growing, most diverse, most dense overall developments in the Salt Lake region. But it, as we talked about, has a ton of single family homes, has some apartments, has some condos, has a city center, all of those things because they knew the light rail was coming there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Elaine, we've talked about quite a number of things here. This has been fantastic. I know it's a working day for you. Is there anything you'd like to hit here at the end?
Just really, really excited to be here and to talk about this and remind the people in this valley that this is possible, but it's not free. I'm working to see if we can figure out how to pay for it, and I'm likely to be asking people if they're willing to pay for it. And, we live in a democracy. If they're not willing to pay for it, we'll get what we get. If they are willing to pay for it, we'll get what we get. Right. And so think about the trade-offs of, what a couple of $100s a year could mean in terms of quality of life, not just for you, because we talked about even if I don't use it, it is going to impact me, but for your children, for your elders, for the people who clean your house, for the people who serve your food. If we have a place to live where all of those people can live a good, comfortable, productive life, where they have an opportunity to contribute in ways that they might not otherwise if they're working 3 jobs and can't get their head above water, just think what a better place it would be to live. So as we talk about this, think about it in the big picture, not the small picture. This isn't a small picture thing. That's how we've treated transit in this region. We've added a little bit here and a little bit there. If we just do this, we'll get a little bit more. I want to look big and say, if we think big, how could it make a difference? Not just for you, but for this whole region, and how successful and productive and happy people could be.
God bless you. Thank you for what you're doing for Idaho. I've really enjoyed this. Let's do it again.
I would love to.
Awesome.